It's a great honor for me to introduce Chairman Jim Banks. He is without question among the most serious, intelligent people in town and among the most courageous. And that, I think, is the virtue that counts perhaps most today. Just a few examples. Not many people have spoken out so fiercely against wokeness in the military. You know, when you do that, there are huge risks. There's a huge officer class that doesn't like hearing that. But when you keep talking about it, you know you're talking about the right person. Not many members of Congress have been so openly against the official regime ideology on transgenderism. But Chairman Jim Banks has, and we're very grateful to him for it. Chairman Banks is among the few that have thought through with a great deal of detail about what the GOP should do from here on out, how to think through what powers it should use in the House to investigate, inquire into the regime that rules the country. Now, you guys already know Chairman Banks is the chairman of the RSC, which has 160 members in it. He's a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. He's a friend of the Claremont Institute. He will, without question, play an enormous role in the GOP in the coming years. And of course, he is the first real conservative to run a competitive leadership race in recent history. Please, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here with all of you today. Arthur, I am told that I am General Milley's second least favorite member of Congress, only exceeded, thank you, only exceeded by Matt Gaetz. So I'm okay with that, right? I mean, when he appears before the Armed Services Committee, I sit nearby Representative Gaetz, and he stares us down because he knows it's coming. And I'm proud of that. We have a lot of work to do now that we have the gavels in the majority. Although Tuesday night was a very disappointing outcome. I'll be one of the few Republicans who will stand before an audience and say what needs to be said. Wasn't the outcome that we expected, that we desired, that it should have been on election night. It wasn't the red wave that the Republican Party promised. It was a very disappointing outcome on election night. As the dust is settling, it appears that we might have a two-seat Republican majority, and we won't have a Republican majority in the Senate. And to me, that is inexcusable and an indictment of the Republican Party's campaign message that obviously didn't present a clear alternative to the Biden and Democrat message that is destroying this country. So we didn't do our job during the campaign cycle, and we ended up with a narrow, slim, two-seat Republican majority likely in the House and a continued Democrat majority in the Senate, which is really disappointing. It limits our opportunity to pass a legislative agenda. The so-called commitment to America the Republicans put forward is on lifeline at this point in a narrow two-seat majority. It means that we won't be able to advance important bills and causes through the legislative process in a slim majority. But what it does mean, having a two-seat majority, it does mean that any one member of the majority can do what I think needs to be done, and that's provide a vigorous oversight and investigations agenda in the upcoming Congress. We can use our majority to slow down the Democrat and the Biden agenda and stop funding many of the most radical climate change and critical race theory priorities of the Democrats' agenda in the White House or in the Congress that we've seen over the past couple of years. But obviously, we won't be able to pass the conservative agenda that many of us want to. But only one member of Congress can step up and provide oversight, and that's what I want to talk about today. We all know that America and the American way of life is under attack like never before. And that's what this organization and institution is dedicated to doing something about. We need to expose the enemy and understand their tactics before we start fighting back when we take over the gavels on January 3rd. For example, many of us assumed that big tech was solely responsible for censoring conservatives. But thanks to The Intercept's reporting, we now know that Facebook and Twitter were actually responding to pressure from our own government, from the federal government, the US government. So Republicans now know that fixing online censorship requires fixing big tech, but it also requires fixing our own Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. So I want you to think about that for a moment. This is how Republican oversight should function, because we still can't really answer basic questions like, who is behind critical race theory in our schools? Who's advancing that and pushing critical race theory in our schools or even in the military? What role do teachers, unions, school boards, the Department of Education, and the media play? That's what we need to use oversight in the Congress to figure out. Why did we reflexively lock down America because of COVID? Was it Anthony Fauci alone who was responsible for doing that? Was it the media? Were businesses pushing for it as well? Was corporate America pushing for the lockdowns? Was there international pressure to lock down America reflexively because of COVID? And why was any of that allowed to happen in the first place? That's the type of oversight and investigations agenda that Republicans must advance in a two-seat, maybe a slim majority. Ladies and gentlemen, we need Devin Nunes-type oversight more than ever before. Thank you for the one person who's clapping. Because you know what I'm talking about. We need new and more Devin Nuneses to step up to the plate with gavels in their hand, chairing committees and subcommittees to provide that type of oversight. As I think about where we are today, Joe Biden is the least scrutinized president in American history. His administration is the least scrutinized administration in American history. Dr. Fauci resigned last month because he was afraid of Republican oversight efforts. And I hope that we don't miss the opportunity to live up to his fear. He's the lucky one. He's resigned, but there are a lot of them who are left. In the military, we would call this a target-rich environment, right? So when we think about oversight and investigations, this is indeed a target-rich environment. Committee chairs have an unbelievable independence. They're not beholden to the speaker, the majority leader, the leaders of the Congress. The committee chairs have unbelievable independence to investigate the administration, no matter what committee, from the Education Committee to the Armed Services Committee. Obviously, the Oversight and Investigations Committee is wholly devoted to that, but the Ways and Means Committee, the Financial Services Committee, the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, all of the committees have unbelievable independence to provide oversight, and I hope that they use it. A lot of our committee chairs will tell you that they're going to investigate this or that, the Department of Justice, Hunter Biden's laptop, but then they'll make excuses later for why they didn't do it. And I want to ask all of you, don't buy into their excuses. Hold them accountable. Hold these committee chairs accountable to do what they said they were going to do and provide the type of oversight and investigations and accountability that many Republicans have been promising on the campaign trail. Make sure that they live up to it in the majority. From my rank and file seat, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that our chairs do that. So with that, I thought I would give you a brief overview of, I serve on a few committees, the Armed Services Committee and the Education and Labor Committee. So to give you an overview of where we go from here, before I open it up to you to answer and address any questions or thoughts that you might have, here's my wish list for where we go from here. On the Education and Labor Committee, we must investigate the decision to recommend the vaccine or demand the vaccine for young children who face virtually no risk for COVID. Then we need to investigate the National School Board Association for colluding with the Biden administration to label concerned parents domestic terrorists. Then we need to investigate Randy Weingarten for working with the Biden administration to extend school lockdowns. And then we need to force the Department of Education to produce statistics related to school lockdowns and learning loss. So that would be a primary mission of the Education and Labor Committee, of which I am a senior member. We already saw that the Department of Education has walked back an executive order to require schools to include the 1619 project in their curriculum after public backlash. So you can see just from that sunlight works, right? This is why having hearings and hauling these guys into the committee hearing room and having oversight and investigation committee hearings is meaningful, because sunlight works. So with that, we have to investigate the Department of Education for promoting CRT and find out whether they violated existing federal civil rights laws in doing it. Then we need to investigate states' use of federal COVID funds to promote anti-American curriculum in schools. Then we need to review learning materials in states like California and New York for CRT-related content that potentially violates federal law and would disqualify them from federal funding. And then we will investigate, my favorite, we're going to investigate the teachers' union's role in school closures and curriculum decisions and develop legislation to ban teachers' unions from doing that. And then last on the Education Committee, we need to review the accreditation requirements for charter and public schools and whether curriculum requirements violate religious conscience rights. So that's my hope for one of the three committees that I serve on, the Education and Labor Committee. Then we get to the Armed Services Committee. I'm a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. I've been proud to wear the uniform, and I'm ashamed of some of the leadership or lack thereof that we have at the highest ranks of the United States military today that projects wokeness and weakness abroad in such a severe way. So with that, West Point and the Naval Academy both are indoctrinating cadets with critical race theory, and we must hold them accountable for it. We need to investigate the wrongful termination of service members over the vaccine mandate and their blanket denial of religious accommodation requests, which violate the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the Department of Defense's own policy. We need to investigate the Pentagon's stand-down order and their discrimination against conservative service members. It's not a coincidence that the thousands of our men and women who serve in the military who were flushed out of the military for not taking the vaccine are overwhelmingly those on the right. That's not a coincidence. We need to investigate the Pentagon's policies related to political social media posts. And we need to end the Department of Defense's vaccine mandate as soon as we get the gavels and take over on January 3rd. The statistics in the military are alarming. The Army recently announced that it has been forced to cut its size once again by 12,000 soldiers, and just the Army alone, because it can't find volunteers to fill its ranks. All branches of the military face similar staffing shortages. July of 2022, the Army opened its doors to recruits who failed to meet initial body fat and academic standards because of the recruiting crisis. That's the crisis that this administration has created because of their woke agenda. Oversight and investigations and accountability matters, and all of you must do everything that you can to hold a Republican majority to make sure that they do what they said they're going to do and provide it. So thank you for having me. God bless you all. I'm happy to answer any questions or address your concerns and comments.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned investigating New York and California in terms of CRT in the school systems. Why not nationwide? Because I know I'm in North Carolina. It's very bad there too.
Yes, I'm all for it. I point out the two of them because they are probably the two with the biggest violation of how they use COVID funds and promoting CRT, but of course nationwide. Of course we won't single out California and New York, but they do both provide the greatest examples.
Congressman, thank you for your service. Quick question. Investigations, why can't we investigate, we don't want to federalize elections, but why can't we investigate why it takes so long for some of these election results to come back?
Yeah, I actually think there's a entirely appropriate role for the Congress to provide that type of oversight and investigations of, especially when we're talking about federal elections. Okay, we have federal election law that's being violated, and we should provide that type of oversight. So my hope is that the House Administration Committee, which has oversight of elections, and from HAVA, the federal election law, my hope is that they will launch into those investigations. And it's going to take conservatives in the House. It's going to take outside influence, maybe from organizations like this one, to encourage that to happen. I hope that you'll step up and make your voices heard and demand that.
Other questions?
Congressman, Title IX regs, the obviously are horrible. They're just, if anybody's read them, they're horrible. I have them memorized, sadly. Your committee, at this juncture, really can't do much in terms of a pushback. They're likely to be enacted. So it's really going to be up to the states. I want to make sure that that's correct. And anybody who works with the states, that they really are going to have to ask for an injunction immediately against the regs based on, the Supreme Court ruling in West Virginia versus EPA. Is that your take on it? Is there anything your committee can do around once those are enacted?
I think we have a duty to try. And if we have 220 Republicans in the House, I can't imagine that 220 of them wouldn't vote for legislation to fix the mess that the Biden administration has created with Title IX. And if simply starting with saving girls' sports is a place to find broad consensus, that's one place to start. Doesn't go far enough. But as a girl dad of daughters 13, 11, and 9 years old, it's a mission of mine to take on that cause. So I hope our committee passes bills, but on top of that, I hope we hold hearings and bring those who have been affected by this outrageousness before the hearing to testify and give them a platform. That's the first thing that we can do.
Andrew Kloster.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe the appropriate use of, I know it's a narrow majority, but the appropriate use of congressional subpoenas? I know we've seen some pretty aggressive, maybe even unlawful subpoenas. I don't want to repeat that. I don't think anybody does, but kind of, are they off the table, on the table? What should they sort of look like as a tool?
Yeah, totally on the table. And each of the committees have, again, they have significant independence with subpoena power that they should use in many circumstances to tackle these issues. So, Jim Jordan will have subpoena power to go to haul Hunter Biden before the committee and hold the hearings to expose the the Biden family cartel, some of their entanglements with our biggest adversaries. And I hope he uses that. I hope that's the place to start. See, again, it's a target-rich environment. That's probably the place. That's the first place to go. So I hope he does it.
Julie Kelly.
Congressman, what percentage of the Republican House members are really serious about confronting the Department of Justice and FBI, either seeking major reforms, not dismantling, abolishing? I don't see that. But what percentage are really serious about tackling that? Because it's a major issue. And can I add one name to the list of people who recently retired so he wouldn't be grilled by Congress? And that's a man named Stephen D'Antuono, who was the head of the Detroit FBI field office during the Whitmer Fednapping hoax, quickly promoted to take over the Washington field office. He announced his retirement 2 weeks ago, so he won't face any scrutiny. Hopefully he will. So, but if you could just say what percentage you think are really serious.
I don't know if I want to answer that question. By the way, whatever the Claremont Institute equivalent is of a Pulitzer Prize, Julie Kelly deserves it. So, you are incredible. Your work is incredible, and every day I'm more grateful for it. So I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know the answer to it. I just think that what all of you are doing here today, all of you standing up and making your voices heard, that will be the difference between whether or not this 220-seat Republican majority will be bold or not and do what it has to do. So that's what you stand for. I hope you rattle the cages and make your voices heard in a loud way to encourage these committees who are going to have more oversight authority than what most Americans realize to do things that they need to do.
To follow up on what you just said, there was discussion about the church committee as a model of how do you feel about having an all of Congress committee that would sort of have even more powers than the individual committees and would focus attention for the media in a way that the individual committees might not be able to?
Yeah, I can buy into the concept of the church committee. Some of us have been talking about creating a anti-woke caucus. And maybe Julie, we can see how many members we can get to join in. That could help answer your question. I've asked my staff to go back today and start working on it. It's an idea that's been born out of some very key people in this room. So that's something that we're looking at doing in the next Congress. I think that could be meaningful, but you're talking about a larger, more significant, something that would be legislated into existence. I can create an anti-woke caucus on my own. Hopefully that would be a engine to produce some results that are desperately needed.
We've heard a lot of people talking about so far investigations and oversight, which has to be the start, defunding or fencing funding and other ways to slow down the abuses of power. But per Julie's point, we've got malfeasance and abuse of power by the FBI and the DOJ that is ongoing against U.S. citizens in a way I don't think any of us have ever witnessed in our lifetime. The one word I haven't heard yet today is impeachment. And I'm not talking about Joe Biden. That'd be a waste of time. I think having him sleepwalking around is actually preferable to Kamala. But what about Christopher Wray? Why can't we have some accountability? We're not going to get accountability, and the press is not going to cover. I run World Strat. We do information warfare. I understand the uphill battle to get our issues into the media, but they would have to cover an impeachment in a way that they won't cover investigations or anything else. If you put Christopher Wray in the dock, you get to depose people, you get to ask questions, and if you can get him impeached, you get a trial in the Senate. Is that something our team is worth, or at least considering doing?
Yeah, so accountability is the result of oversight and investigations, of effective oversight and investigations. And accountability is impeachment. So impeach Christopher Wray, he deserves it. Impeach Secretary Mayorkas, he deserves it. You don't need to hold a hearing to convince me. I'm already there. So, and you could add a lot more to that list as well. So this will be a opening act of the Republican majority. How far do we go and when do we do it? I hope we do it quickly. There will be some who will want to hold back. I don't know if all of you saw the Mitt Romney comments in the last couple of days. Back off of oversight, back off of investigations and accountability. So that would be one mindset. And in closing, my commitment to you is that I will provide the opposite. So thank you. God bless.